Hey, podcast friends. This is Dr. Steve Hewlett with the podcast, Simple Healthy Choices for Weight Loss, where every week we help people who have realized that as their health has been declining over the years, the number of medications they are being prescribed is increasing. We want to help you reverse this health path so you can live the vibrant, pain-free, and hopefully medication-free life you deserve to live. If you'd like even more information on this topic, you can go to Amazon or Audible and pick up my book, Your Plate is Your Fate. And if you think my book helps you on your new health path, please tell your friends and leave a review where you purchased it. Hey, in this podcast, I want to explain just briefly what makes you feel hungry and what makes you feel full. And there's a lot of different things that go into this, but there's two main hormones that I want to explain to you or talk to you about that has everything to do with your hunger and your satiety. And satiety just means that you feel full. And so the first one we're going to talk about is a hormone that gets secreted from your empty stomach to let your body know that it's hungry and that it needs to eat. And this hormone is called ghrelin. So when you hear your stomach growling, it's because it's producing ghrelin. And what ghrelin does is ghrelin is a hormone that gets secreted from your stomach. It goes into the bloodstream and up to the lateral hypothalamus in your brain. And that tells your body, I'm hungry. And that makes you start eating. Now, one problem with this is that ghrelin doesn't really distinguish between whether you're hungry or whether you're thirsty. Now, if you actually get thirsty, you're kind of way late in the game as far as dehydration, as you've already heard in one of my previous podcasts on the importance of water. But what a lot of people do is when they have this ghrelin is being released because they're thirsty, they actually think that they're hungry and they're going to reach for some kind of food to fill their stomach up instead of drinking the water that the body's actually asking for. So, and again, if you want to hear more about that, you can go back to my later podcasts on the importance of water. But as far as ghrelin itself, ghrelin is very important because if you don't have the hormone, if you don't have that feeling of hunger, you're probably never going to eat, and therefore you're not going to be nourishing your body, and therefore you could die. So having ghrelin is actually very important. The main thing with ghrelin is that it is, like I said, it's released when the stomach is empty or when your body is sensing some kind of a nutrient deprivation, including water. And that's when this is going to stimulate your hypothalamus and say, okay, it's time for me to take in some nutrients. What they found, though, is there are different things that can actually decrease the amount of ghrelin that you're producing. And strangely enough, these things that have been linked to the decreased ghrelin production is the same thing that we've been talking about, how important it is for a healthy, nutritious diet. So when you eat a healthy, fiber-rich diet, this will decrease the amount of ghrelin that's being released. Also, they found that if you have a diet that's high in protein, this also can decrease the amount of ghrelin that's going to be released. So remember, it's going to be monitoring your hunger throughout your whole day. So as you start eating these things like a high fiber diet and protein, that's going to decrease the amount of ghrelin that's going to be getting released throughout the day. The other thing is exercise, good sleep, and also decreased stress. So all the exact same things that we've been talking about that you really need for a healthy nutrition diet is the same things we're talking also about stimulation of ghrelin. And so again, what you want to do, and we've already talked about this one also, about the different hunger hormones. Remember, when you eat protein and you eat fat, and fiber, high fiber, that's going to stay in your stomach for longer periods of time. So the ghrelin is not going to be getting released, so you're not going to be continuously hungry. The other thing, remember that when you eat protein and fat, that there's also those two other hormones that are down that gets released through the intestines, which was the peptide YY and cholecystokinin. And these are the ones that also stimulate the hypothalamus and continuously tell you that you're not hungry anymore. And this is very, very important because as you can see, carbohydrates is nothing that helps with decreasing ghrelin. Actually, carbohydrates are going to increase your ghrelin release because when you eat carbohydrates, again, they get secreted in the intestines and then they get immediately absorbed. They get turned into glucose. Your glucose levels go high, and this makes your insulin levels go high. And this is not what you want, because what this does is it constantly makes you where you're hungry and you want to eat more and more food. So again, as far as the hormone ghrelin that makes you feel hungry, if you stick with eating a healthy, fiber-rich diet, protein, you get good exercise throughout the week, you get a good amount of sleep, and you decrease your stress, all those can help decrease ghrelin so you don't have that feeling of hunger. And remember also that if you do feel hungry, maybe you want to try to reach for some water instead of some food right off the bat. And a lot of times that's what your body is actually asking for. Okay, so that is the hunger hormone ghrelin. Now, the other thing that we're going to be talking about is leptin. And leptin is your satiety hormone. And this is important because what they found is leptin is just like ghrelin was stimulated or released from your empty stomach. Leptin is released from free fat cells or full fat cells. So back earlier when they started looking at fat cells and everything, they thought the fat cells, all they did was stored energy in the form of fat. That's all they thought the fat cells do. But now they've been doing a lot more research and then a lot more studying and finding that fat cells are actually an endocrine organ. And remember, an endocrine organ is an organ in your body that secretes a hormone, which is a tiny little substance that gets secreted into your bloodstream, and then it affects organs all throughout your body in different areas, depending on what the hormone is. The main one that we were talking about is the pancreas. Remember, the pancreas causes the release of insulin, and insulin is a hormone, but insulin affects organs all over your body. And this is how your body utilizes both fat and glucose to determine which one it's going to use for its energy and which one it's going to be getting stored as. So fat cells do a lot more than just store energy. What they found as fat cells as an endocrine organ, they release a lot of different things that actually promote or cause inflammation. And these are things like cytokines or complement components, resistin, and adiponectin. These are they're related into the inflammatory process that your body has. So the more fat you have on your body, the more of these inflammatory mediators you're releasing. And again, we've talked about it in another podcast where this is why we saw a lot of this with the COVID-19 patients, that it was the ones that were extremely obese that were releasing all this inflammation into their body, along with the COVID that was also causing inflammation. And these are the patients that ended up actually dying from COVID. And the majority of them, these were the obese patients. And this is why, because of all the inflammation that fat also produces. That's one of the reasons. But some other hormones that your fat cells secrete are things that affect your blood clotting. And these are things like plasminogen activator inhibitor 1. It also releases some hormones that also affect your blood pressure, like the proteins of the renin-angiotensin system. And this is where a lot of the medications that you take for high blood pressure, these affect the same renin-angiotensin system. So just the fact that you have a lot more fat on your body, remember, this is nothing about how you look. This has nothing to do with you should feel proud of yourself whether you're fat or skinny. This has nothing to do with that. We are talking straight health and how unhealthy it is for you to have excess fat on your body. And this is one of the ways with all the inflammation, the clotting, and the blood pressure issues that you can get into with the hormones that are secreted from these fat cells. But besides that, the main hormone that fat cells also have excreted or excrete is a substance called leptin. And leptin is the satiety hormone. And what leptin does is leptin goes up to the medial hypothalamus. So ghrelin stimulates the hypothalamus on the outside, and leptin stimulates the hypothalamus on the inside. So there's lateral hypothalamus and medial hypothalamus. When the leptin stimulates the medial hypothalamus, what this does is this tells your body a couple things. One, it tells it to speed up its metabolism. And the other thing, it tells your body, I'm not hungry anymore. So this was a wonderful thing when they discovered this. And it was actually discovered back in 1994. And where it came from the Greek term lepto, which means skinny or thin. And so they were so excited when they found out about this leptin. They thought, oh, we finally found the obesity gene. This is going to be great. They can extract this leptin. They can give this to obese patients. And all of a sudden, it's going to make them where they're not hungry anymore. They can start losing their fat cells. And this worked for some of the patients. They got some obese patients that were leptin deficient, and they gave them this leptin, and sure enough, they did not get hungry anymore. And their weight started coming off, and it totally changed their lives. Now, this is when they really got excited. The drug companies were getting excited. Scientists were getting excited. We thought we finally took care of it. So they decided to do a bigger study. They got all these obese patients, and they drew up this leptin, and they give them the leptin, and they found absolutely nothing. No matter how much leptin they kept giving these obese patients, it did not curb their appetite at all. And this was very disheartening. So they tried to figure out what is going on. Why did it work in some patients and some patients it didn't? What they found out was when they gave this to the patients to begin with, they already knew they were giving them to patients who were leptin deficient. But when they started getting them to all the obese people, they found out that these patients are not leptin deficient. What actually happens is they have so much fat on their bodies that they're producing so much leptin, because remember, leptin gets released when your fat cells are full. So when you have an obese patient with all these fat cells on their body and they're constantly getting full, when these full fat cells release leptin, it was going up to the medial hypothalamus like it's supposed to, but the hypothalamus was getting so bombarded by so much leptin that it actually became leptin resistant. And that's why if you're low on leptin and you get this leptin, it made you where you weren't hungry anymore. But if you're high on leptin and we just gave you more leptin, it did nothing. In fact, it could actually cause it to be worse, to make you even more leptin resistant. Because remember, just like all the other hormones, just like when we're talking about insulin and insulin resistance, your body, if you start giving it the nucleus accumbens when you're filling your pleasure center, when you give too much pleasure to your nucleus accumbens, you get resistance in your nucleus accumbens. You get resistance to pleasure. When you have too much insulin floating around your body, then your body becomes resistant to insulin. Same thing, when you have too much leptin floating around your body, then the medial hypothalamus gets resistant to this leptin. And this is really a bad thing, because what this means is the more fat you have on the body, the more leptin you produce, the more leptin resistance you get, and the hungrier you are. And this is why there's a common phrase that is stated that people are not obese because they eat all the time. They eat all the time because they are obese. And this is why that statement is made, because the more obese you get, the more leptin you produce, the more leptin resistance you get, and the hungrier you are. The other thing that they found out with leptin, besides having too much leptin in the body, but the other thing that has been stated is that high insulin levels also block leptin from stimulating the medial hypothalamus. So when you eat a high carbohydrate meal, and this gets turned into glucose, this causes your insulin levels go up. Your insulin levels go up, and it blocks leptin, so it makes you more hungry. It keeps you hungry. And remember, we said the same thing when you eat high carbohydrate meal. It does not stimulate your peptide YY or cholecystokinin in your intestines, so it doesn't keep you hungry. And now we found out that also it causes insulin to block leptin. So there's so many different things that eating carbohydrates do to your body that make you where you are continuously hungry. And food manufacturers are banking on this. They are a business. They want your money, and the only way to get your money is to keep you hungry. That's not their fault. They are a business. You have total control over what you put in your mouth. So please just remember that anytime you eat carbohydrates, I want you to look at that as this carbohydrate is going to make me ravenously hungry in just a couple hours. So if you want to stay full and you want to get healthy, eat protein, eat fat, eat a high fiber diet, and that's going to stay in your intestines longer. It's going to keep you full for longer. And this also is going to block the ghrelin release that we talked about earlier. So you're not going to be getting hungry that way as well. Versus when you eat carbohydrates, the carbohydrates actually cause more of a ghrelin release. They do not stay in your intestines to stimulate your satiety hormones from there. They get immediately absorbed, and this gets turned into glucose, makes your insulin rise, which also makes your glucose drop lower again and makes you hungry again. But also this insulin is going to block the leptin in your hypothalamus, which also makes you hungry again. So what I really would like for you guys to do is when you are eating a meal, look at your plate and look at what is the protein that's on your plate, the meat. Those get broken down into the basic building blocks of amino acids. And these amino acids are going to go into your body, go into your liver. They're going to get reconstructed and put back together to make other proteins that your body is needing all the time. You need proteins for everything that happens in your body. All your cells that are being produced constantly need protein, especially all your muscle cells. So especially if you're working out, which everybody should be doing resistance training, and we'll talk more about that later. But if you're working out, you need this protein to revitalize or to make new cells in your bodies. When you eat fat, fat is a fantastic energy source. And that is what you should be using for your energy instead of carbohydrates, like we've been talking in all these past podcasts. So protein and fat will keep you feeling full. Carbohydrates will make you hungry. So when you're looking at your plate, you look at the meat, and that's protein that's going to be put into your body to increase your cell growth. When you eat fat, that's going to be a good, healthy energy source that you can use. And when you look at carbohydrates, that's going to be something that's going to make you ravenously hungry, and it's going to raise your insulin levels and raise your leptin levels. And there really isn't anything good about them. So remember, when you eat carbohydrates, please stick to the vegetables. Stick to multicolored vegetables. All the different kinds are going to be fine. Stick to the non-starchy vegetables. So if you're really obese and you're really trying to lose weight and try to get healthy, you might want to stay away from the starchy vegetables like sweet potatoes, regular potatoes, anything like that. Stay away from the starchy vegetables, at least at first, or just minimize them to only, once or twice a week. But if you're really, really wanting to get healthy and lose your fat, you really kind of want to stay away from carbohydrates. And remember, as I've said in the podcast in the past, there are essential amino acids, which means your body does not make them, and you have to get them from the food that you eat. And that means eating protein. There's also essential fatty acids, which means your body does not produce it, but it needs it. So you get this from the fat that you eat. You really kind of need to focus more on the omega-3 fatty acids also. But that's going to be in your fat. There is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. Your body can make all the glucose it needs. It can make it out of fat, and it can make it out of protein and whatever carbs that you're going to have also from your fruits and your vegetables. So if you want to eat healthy, if you want to stay feeling full, you want to stick to high, rich fiber diet and protein and fat. And then don't forget how important it is managing your stress and also getting good amount of sleep is as far as hunger. And also remember that when you're hungry, you may not be hungry. When your stomach is growling, that could mean that you're thirsty. So always go for water and first, since we've already talked about how most people walk around in a dehydrated state. So anyway, that's kind of the thing. Ghrelin is your hunger hormone, and this is what makes you feel hungry, or could be when you're thirsty. And what can decrease the amount of ghrelin that you release throughout the day is what you eat. It's having the high rich fiber, high protein, high fat, exercise, and good sleep, and decreasing your stress. And your leptin levels, the ones that actually make you feel full, the ones that make you where you don't want to eat anymore, this can be decreased when you start decreasing your fat cells. Because when you start decreasing your fat cells, you're going to decrease the amount of leptin that's being produced. And that also means that now you can also make your medial hypothalamus become sensitive to leptin again. So I know I repeated myself a lot, kept saying the same things, but you never know, what somebody's going to latch on to. I just want to make sure that you guys realize that what you eat has everything to do with the amount of fat that you have on your body and how healthy you are, and truly how many medications you're going to be getting put on in the future, how many doctor's visits you're going to have, and how many hospitalizations. And it all begins with what you put in your mouth. And so I hope you're learning this from this. And if you have any questions at all, please contact me and let me know. And if there's another podcast you'd like for me to talk on more, just let me know. And I'll sign off from here. That'll be it for today. And then I'll see you or talk to you on the next podcast. Bye-bye. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button below and be sure to tell someone else who may want to change their health path as well. And don't forget, you can also purchase my book, Your Plate is Your Fate, on Amazon or Audible. And if you do, please leave a review.